to make things. So the great plague of 2020 some time ago left an everlasting impact on society. That impact is cottagecore. Oh, cottagecore, we're probably all sick of it. I'm not. And according to the internet, neither is the algorithm. If you're like me and typically live under a rock, cottagecore is an internet aesthetic popularized by adolescents and young adults, supposedly, celebrating an idolized rural life. Thanks, Wikipedia. So the weird thing about cottagecore is I actually had no idea what it was for years. I was playing Animal Crossing with my friend back in 2020, and she asked me,
what kind of theme are you going for your island?
Oh, I guess country living with lots of vintage stuff and nature.
Oh, so you're going for cottagecore?
I guess? So I Googled it and I was like, all right then, I guess it's cottagecore. The truth of the matter is I've always loved that British countryside look. In fact, my grandmother actually lived in a Tudor-style home, complete with the stucco, the wood, stone, and brick. No lie, I even inherited her medieval revival Jacobean dining set from the 1920s. Old stuff, it's in my blood. But there is some merit to our obsession with dreamy rural living. Whether you had to quarantine and work from home, or do what the rest of us peasant folk had to do and continue risking your lives working in public, I firmly believe that cottagecore planted a seed into our minds about the soullessness of modern work, the soullessness of the daily grind, and meetings that could have been emails. Personally speaking, as someone who did work with her hands, I do feel more fulfilled when my hard work is more than just a product. In fact, there's an appreciation for the origin of the materials that you get to work with, the dignity of your skill set, and the pride that comes when your work delights others or makes their lives easier. So I decided to let cottagecore seep into my personal life in unique little ways. For the past 3 years, I worked hard to make sure that my house and lifestyle was giving cottagecore. It's obviously not just me, we all fell for it. The dream of homesteading life from a magical distant past where you get to bake your own bread, sew your own clothes, sew your own flowy skirts and sip tea in delicate china and grow your own food. Well, I attempted this within the parameters of my cottage white townhouse in the middle of a small city. And let me tell you, the reality is that this shit was hard. 'Tis only me and my husband that reside in this house, and we're both regular people with full-time jobs in expensive-ass America.
So needless to say, there were some expectations and realities.
Actually made this. It's pretty terrible. And it chipped when I was moving, but I'm still proud of it. Anyway, the very first thing that I learned real quick as I embarked on this lifestyle was that I had to get rid of my high expectations for how this would turn out. One thing that always got to me about the whole cottagecore thing was just how carefully curated everyone's social media was. The TikTok reels, the Instagram posts, they were all just so beautiful with color coordinated photos and illustrations. They are full of wonder and woodland creatures, and they serve their purpose of allowing us to live vicariously through them. And once the sugar high was over, down came the inevitable crash of inadequacy, aka reality. To keep me grounded, I decided to treat this experiment not like an aesthetic, but rather like a subculture. A subculture is defined as a cultural group within a larger culture, often having beliefs or interests at variance with those of the larger culture. Subcultures can be about the look, but it's mostly about the beliefs and interests. Subcultures also have greater longevity than aesthetic chasing because it's more of a way of life as opposed to a particular look. It usually has a set of ideals and principles rather than the coolest stuff that you can buy. I didn't just want to post pretty pictures of my garden and pretty pictures of my bakes and other goodies, although I that's what I did. I wanted to live the reality of cottagecore as best as I could with the materials and home that I already have. And obviously, I don't live on a farm. I don't own any farm animals or a barn, and my townhouse is in the suburbs. But I can still fulfill some of the core ideals that cottagecore pushes, such as traditional skills, nature, and simpler living. Pause on that simpler living piece, though. Keep that in the back of your mind as you watch this.
So first, gardening expectations. I wish we could all have Bridgerton-style gardens or homey cottage gardens with various flowers and wild edibles. And after watching tons of Ron Finley, aka Gangsta Gardener, and James Prigioni from the Garden Channel, I was ready to get down and dirty in my own garden and transform my plain, ugly plot of rocks into a thriving food forest.
Now for the reality. First, the sad parts. There was a lot of death in my garden, a lot of memento mori. Nearly 50% of everything that I started either never germinated or died, just plain old died. Or even worse, they did germinate. I managed to grow things, but then they never produced any fruits. I'm still learning how to improve conditions for my plants. It's a lifelong struggle. I also ended up having a really bad slug infestation. I wish I had photos, but to put it all into perspective, I would go outside at night after a night of rain. So as an example, usually they came out after it would rain or while it was raining. And I would have, I kid you not, thousands of slugs all over the side of my house, all over my garden beds. And they were just munching away on all my greens, all my marigolds, anything that was leafy and delicious. I just can't grow marigolds anymore, and they're some of my favorite flowers, but they get decimated by the slugs in only a few days. I also have these really bad summer heat waves where the sun is sometimes so harsh on my plants that it causes the fruit blossoms to just drop despite daily watering and using wood chips. There were also some months where the wasps were so bad that I couldn't get near my plants. I know that I shouldn't, but I'm sorry. I run from anything that can sting me because they're terrifying. Stinging bugs hurt. And I know one day I will get lit up. One day it will happen, but hopefully not right now. Another thing as far as reality goes, you will run into wildlife. Like, no joke, you will. You will have to deal with wildlife. If you're lucky, you'll run into a garter snake. If you're unlucky, you'll run into a cottonmouth. And the healthier your garden, the more terrifying the wildlife. Unfortunately, I accidentally deleted some footage, but I did run into several snakes, even inside my pots. And I've had to learn how to differentiate between the venomous ones and the non-venomous ones. Before I gardened, there were never snakes around my house. I had lived in this house for about 4 years, and then all of a sudden, once I put the garden in, bam, snakes everywhere. I've had to learn how to accept that if you're gonna have a healthy garden, you're gonna have snakes. And I had to get used to the fact that healthy gardens will produce not just snakes, but a lot of things that you don't want. Maybe there's some insects or birds that you don't want around your garden simply for the fact that they will steal your food. The good thing is that having snakes isn't all that bad, even though you do have to be careful. They have reduced, for example, the rodent population, and they do eat up the insects that wreak havoc on your garden. So there are some good things, but I did learn that you should be good to them, and if you're good to them, they'll be good to you. The healthier your garden, the more you'll also have to share with the wildlife. So you're growing food, you're on a roll. You've got lettuce here, you've got kale there, you've got maybe a whole bunch of really beautiful tomatoes. Well, birds will run away with your cherry tomatoes, as will the squirrels. They'll also run away with your berries. And sometimes that cute little bunny will take all your lettuce, all your lettuce are belong to us. You will not think that they're cute when you've got rows of gorgeous butterhead lettuce and then they're just gone because bunnies. I swear, ever since the bunnies start taking stuff, you're gonna start looking at them like they're food. Another thing, you will not be wearing beautiful pinafores while tending to your garden. This is messy work with a lot of dirt, a lot of mud, a lot of manure, a lot of bugs. So I was like, screw this dress crap. I got up in there with sweats and hoodies or a t-shirt and pants and beat up shoes. I didn't want to risk getting rashes and cuts because you will. And I didn't want to deal with hitchhikers in the form of ticks. You will bring in ticks and other creepy crawlies and you have to learn how to just remove them with your own hands. You will also get hurt while gardening, whether it is something stinging you, because I've gotten lit up by lots of mosquitoes and flies. You will also have to deal with being stabbed by thorns or stabbed by dead foliage. You'll have to deal with splinters from your raised beds or your fences, or even just straining your back. There's a lot of bending that you take for granted whenever you're gardening, and it's just a lot of pain all around. It's Now, let's talk about the good. Okay, so now let's talk about the good. I learned to not kill every insect in sight and how to identify helpful insects and destructive ones. Although I've caved in and murdered a lot of slugs, which I know they're not really insects, but I do try not to mess with the ecosystem of my garden unless there's an infestation. I love to see praying mantises, honeybees, beetles, caterpillars, and butterflies, and other wonderful insects that just weren't around before I started gardening. And overall, planting anything can improve the environment. The next thing I learned is that homegrown everything tastes so much better. I used to suffer eating leafy vegetables until I grew my own. I often grow butter lettuce, red sales lettuce, kale, and a variety of oak leaf lettuce. And let me tell you, those taste so much better than what is bought at a store. The difference is just astounding. They have an actual sweetness to them. There's a bit of crispness to the texture. Overall, it's just a different experience than buying a bag of iceberg lettuce from your local market. There are also different varieties of fruits and vegetables, and the varieties of herbs that are available to you are practically endless versus what you can get at a supermarket. You might find that you even love a particular kind of fruit, herb, and vegetable that you will always need to grow in order to be able to eat it. For me, for example, that's lemon balm thyme. I love lemon balm thyme. English thyme can be very medicinal in flavor and taste, and the lemon balm is just so much sweeter and herbaceous and just goes better with all the soups and stews that I like to bake. And the dragon tongue beans, oh my gosh, they're just so good and they're so beautiful. They're like these beautiful tiger striped beans in purple, cream, and green, and they're just so delicious. If I want thyme or Dragon Ball, if I want thyme or dragon tongue beans, not Dragon Balls, dragon tongue beans in my dishes, I need to be able to have them on hand regularly, so I have to grow them myself. The next thing I learned is that foraging is a thing. Like, wow, I found out that pretty much all of the weeds that grow in my garden are edible. And these include, but are not limited to, dandelions, Persian speedwell, and dead nettle. as well as chickweed. Almost forgot about chickweed. A neighbor even beat me to foraging the local dandelion along a major street in my neighborhood. I was gonna go out there with a basket and get all the dandelion, and she beat me to it. I was like, darn it! It's a bit frustrating that America has so much natural food just hanging out in the open, and it's mistaken for weeds. And I even found mulberries and blackberries walking distance from me, just hanging out in the middle of the street. I know it can be intimidating if you've never foraged before, and I know I'm definitely not comfortable foraging for everything, but I learned to see plants in a whole new light, and it just keeps me on my toes to look at something and wonder what kind of leaf is it, what kind of plant is it, and is it edible? Is it safe to eat? Is it something that I should keep in mind the next time I want to make something from scratch? Another thing I learned is that building a community with other gardeners is both fun and socially healthy. Friends and coworkers of mine have shared their produce with me and vice versa. You will appreciate what they have grown and work really hard not to waste it. Plus, you might find that one gardener might have better luck growing one type of produce over another. For example, I haven't really been very successful growing cucumbers with my land, but my friend has. So she gave me a cucumber and I put it into an amazing salad and used the rest to make cucumber water with the mint that I can grow. And I gave one of my friends a bunch of herbs since I have a lot of success growing and maintaining herbs. So I could give her like bunches of mint and bunches of thyme and basil. It's a lot of fun trading these goodies, and it really creates this sense of family and community in your immediate area. The last thing I learned is that nature is healing. I now spend a lot more time outside. In fact, when I renovated my house, I started to actually put more greenery in my home. Even if it's not real, it's artificial eucalyptus, but I need to have some semblance of greenery in my home for me to feel a little bit more comfortable. I also go to parks multiple times a week just to take walks, and I ride my bike a lot more. This time is priceless, and I will spend it meditating on things going on in my life, the good and the bad. I come out of the woods with a better grasp of my situation or personal problems that I might be trying to handle, and I'm able to accept the things that I can't change, and I'm ready to take on the things that I can. Life will never be perfect, but you can take and collect the small wins that you do earn. And being able to take walks in nature really helped me see that. Next, reality. First, the bad. Keeping up with a scratch-inspired diet or a scratch diet in general is very difficult. It started off kind of easy in the beginning because I did cook and bake for a living, so making a lot of dishes and being creative is not new to me. That said, I still work full-time. Eventually, I struggled to keep up with a scratch diet because I had an inconsistent, wonky schedule. At the time, I did not work from, let's say, 9 to 5, Monday through Friday. I typically worked 60 to 70 hours a week, usually at 4 a.m., and if I was lucky, I got out at about 4 p.m. And then sometimes I'd have to do like I forgot what they call it, but essentially you go back in the next day at to close, let's say, from 9 to 6. Clopenings, there we go. I did a lot of clopenings. You go to work at 9 to 6, and you have to be at work again at 3 or 4 the next day in the morning. And so I dealt with this very impossible schedule with no weekends, no holidays, no sense of consistency, didn't have the same days off or the same days to work on a weekly basis. So in order to help me deal with this, I started out baking 2 to 4 loaves of bread at a time so that I could freeze half of them and use them later within the same month. So I could choose let's say I had a Wednesday off. I could bake 4 loaves of bread, and then I would have at least 1 loaf a week after that. This worked until I started preferring to spend my days off doing other things. When I was a full-time baker, I obviously had to make sure that my bakes fit the restaurant and the bakery's standards. So they had to be a certain weight. So you had to make sure your ingredients were on point. You can't have any kind of cross-contamination, right? So When I started doing this at home, however, I went from trying to get the perfect rise and the perfect score technique down to just saying, fudge it. My bread undoubtedly got uglier. Look at this mess. I just didn't care. My primary goal just became, is it edible? Can I put butter on it? Will it hold jam? I am so sorry, tartine fans, but fancy holes don't hold butter. I even found myself neglecting my sourdough starter often, but luckily for me, I can neglect it for a whole year and she'll come back to life with one good feeding and one good cleaning. Her name is Winnie. She's over 5 years old now and she still bakes fantastic bread, with or without holes. After forcing myself to cook this way for an entire year, time became my most precious resource. I learned how to manage time very well. I also learned how to just let certain expectations go. A pie or cake a week or bi-weekly just stopped being the norm. It became just bread, and then the bread started to become a nuisance. The baking became limited to a case-by-case basis. Me and my husband, we just really didn't need to be eating that much bread all the time. We learned to eat less of it to take the edge off of the amount of time I was spending making it. Even though making bread itself is not a difficult task for me, and oftentimes I could really just cheat by letting my bread maker or my KitchenAid stand mixer do most of the dough mixing, the truth was that I still needed to be home to finish baking it, to make sure that it was done. And I still needed to be able to slice it and freeze it. And all of this still takes some degree of time, or a certain amount of time that you had to be home. I was still cooking breakfasts, lunches, and dinners between baking bread. Like, I was still baking desserts. I was still making stuff outside of just the bread. I was still making my own cream, my own sauces, my own dressings, my own jams. I would spend an entire day off just in the kitchen and subsequent evenings after work preparing my food. Like just cutting vegetables, measuring things out, even like just constant meal prep on all my days off. And eventually, I just wanted to stop spending my entire days doing all this hard work and just go bike riding. Like just visit other humans, see other places. I still had to do practical things also, like cleaning the house.
Some of the best food I ever made came out of this experiment. However, unfortunately, this kind of cooking was just unsustainable. So eventually, I started finding methods and strategies to help me cook in a similar manner without burning myself out. Okay, so now let's talk about the good things. We ate a whole lot healthier. My husband and I are already a bit health conscious, but eating from scratch 90% of the time added some depth to our diet. This kind of food not only tastes better, but it's also healthier. It also allows for more room to eat tastier treats. Eating this way also changed our food preferences when it came to eating out. On those days when I just couldn't handle the cooking and baking workload, we ordered healthier options from takeout and restaurant menus. I love food, and I'm not going to pretend that I have a perfect body, but I am happy that eating this way made it much easier to maintain a healthy weight. I also was able to keep more energy throughout the day, and I experienced fewer crashes. Moderation is key, and eating from scratch is so filling that overeating is actually pretty difficult. Combined with regular exercise, walking, stretching, and other low-impact workouts, my husband and I were able to really take advantage of the health benefits of this experiment. Next, I learned how important it was to be creative and work with available ingredients. Sometimes money is just tight or ingredients just aren't available. Cooking and baking in the spirit of cottagecore taught me to let go of the fancy gatekeeping cooking styles and work with what was available to me. I began to value my time, money, and ingredients and treat them like the liquid gold that they are. This meant finding creative ways to cook and use ingredients efficiently so that I could use my time for other things I love, such as family time, outings with friends, journaling, sewing, reading, and other pursuits. I also wasted a lot less food. I used valuable scraps to make stocks and broths, or I repurposed ingredients to make new meals. I became open to ingredient substitutions. No meal needs to be perfect every day. For example, collard greens can be substituted for kale. Beef can be substituted for chicken. Some meals can even be meatless. I don't know about you guys, but food's getting pretty expensive these days. I went a month without vanilla extract and used almond extract or lemon zest instead. I learned to make cake frosting without butter or shortening to save money on butter. I substituted herbs when my garden failed or herbs were unavailable at my local stores. You truly learn to make lemonade with the lemons provided to you.
So eating in the spirit of cottagecore definitely made me an adventurous eater. For example, this season I tried a lot of different types of meats and vegetables that I wouldn't normally eat on a regular basis. So for example, I did eat rabbit for the first time, I ate bison, I ate duck, which are foods that are actually native to the United States, but you would never think so just because our society is set up to favor chicken, pork, and beef. One of the coolest things that I was able to experience was to actually look at all the native plants in my area. And I ate all sorts of new items such as mulberries, black knight runner beans, currant jelly, and then I also was able to make unique things such as ginger maple syrup, and I made a salad using what's called Persian speedwell, and I believe it's called dead nettle, and they're actually edible weeds that we would normally not think twice about killing, but in actuality, there's a lot of edible weeds, that we should be actually using as food. Eating adventurously has little to do with how many exotic foods that you can eat, and more to do with what can you use or what resources can you find to create something delicious in your immediate area. And that actually leads me to my next point about living this cottagecore lifestyle. I became more open to local and seasonal foods.
I should think that the cottagecore lifestyle would highly approve of eating local and seasonal foods. I didn't exactly stick to this 100%, but I did take advantage of a lot of local and seasonal produce and meats and their lower prices. I really got into reading the Sioux Chef's Indigenous Kitchen by Indigenous chef Sean Sherman. I was totally amazed at how Native American foods, recipes, and restaurants are practically non-existent despite its culturally rich food history. Chef Sherman put it best: why isn't the original Indigenous diet all the rage today? It's hyperlocal, ultra-seasonal, uber-healthy, and most of all, it's utterly delicious. I took an interest in not just local farms and seasonal foods, but also flavors associated with native grains, meats, vegetables, and nuts. Some of my new favorite very American foods include bison, rabbit, tepary beans, and blue corn. I plan to experiment with more Indigenous-inspired dishes. I'll put the information for Sean Sherman's book in the description box below. I wanted my home to reflect all of the beautiful Pinterest boards boasting their rustic kitchens, woven wall decorations, and all other whimsical details. I drew inspiration from various historical sites found throughout my town. This would be the first time I would renovate with intentionality. I planned out the colorways, materials, and design. The end result would mix Western, African, and American Indian art as reflective of me and my husband's ancestry. I also wanted a wardrobe with gorgeous dresses and skirts all made with natural fibers and vintage notions. But this wasn't just about the look. I wanted to make everything. I already knew how to knit and crochet, but I also picked up sewing and even some basic carpentry and masonry skills. Renovations are exhausting. My cousin and I spent an entire month renovating my house to fit the aesthetic I was going for. What I thought would take a week or two actually ended up taking 4 weeks. But I regret nothing. No home comes perfect. To get that cottagecore home, I had to balance time with money and style. Luckily for me, my husband couldn't care less what the house looks like, so long as the roof doesn't leak or the walls aren't orange. So I was excited to have our home reflect something homey with countryside elements. It was 6 years since we moved into this house, so a makeover was long overdue. We pretty much repainted the entire house, cut our own brick and tile for the new facings and floors, and we also put in some new fixtures. To make sure that my color scheme made sense, I sewed all new curtains and pillow covers using the paisley pattern cotton canvas. I also made a patchwork throw quilt to add color to our otherwise super brown couch, and I even found the perfect area rug to match the teal, burgundy, and cream color scheme. As a side note, I saved my money for about 4 years to be able to afford all the renovations that I wanted. I do not recommend anyone blow a ton of money in this economy to hire a contracting company. Research DIY tutorials, get professional help from specialists when necessary, and do not overspend when there are perfectly reasonable substitutions for materials. I did not go into debt to do this, so if you're interested in having your own beautiful space, please understand that it is work that takes time, patience, and planning. You can absolutely do it, you just have to change your approach and see this as a lifestyle as opposed to a trend. I'm also very thankful that we already have a lot of antique furniture thanks to my grandmother. When she passed away, I inherited her Jacobean Revival dining room set and a few other pieces that really help pull the look together. We don't plan on buying any new furniture anytime soon, and we probably won't ever have a new dining room set. So what's cottagecore without the quintessential cottagecore dress? I sewed this particular cottagecore dress by hand before I owned a sewing machine. I used a beautiful cotton fabric that fits both the summer and the fall. I actually love how this one turned out. It's eye-catching, colorful, and flattering. That said, it turns out that pinafores, Peter Pan collars, and milkmaid dresses with corsets are just not my style. I think they're absolutely stunning, but I have a very curvy build, pretty large arms, and a muscular broad back, so traditional hyper girlish elements don't make me feel very comfortable. I feel a lot more comfortable in empire waist or A-line dresses with low-cut necklines. A little bit of homemade sewing and experimenting showed me that I prefer grungy, goblin-y, witchy aesthetics, as opposed to whimsical, fairy tale-like cottagecore aesthetics. But I did fall in love with history bounding. It is so much fun incorporating reproduction fabric and accessories into my modern clothes. The main takeaway from this experiment was discovering my sense of style, and this goes for both my wardrobe and interior design choices. I am over the moon with how my new living space looks. Like for many people right now in the States, housing is just criminally expensive, and my husband and I are stuck here until further notice. So why not make the house super comfortable? I stuck with a specific color palette and an aesthetic I know I won't want to change for a long time. And I'm excited to see not just my living room, but my entire house reflect the mood I've always wanted. There are of course many design elements I would have loved to have added to my home, but things are rightfully expensive, and it takes years to collect beautiful, functioning items. My beautifully bound classical literature, art books, and other such interesting items have been collected or created over time, and I've learned that it's quite okay to take a long time to create things, because if I didn't take the time, I wouldn't have the beautiful results I have today. Even though cottagecore dresses aren't really for me, I still love antique and vintage style elements. Instead of wearing cottagecore dresses, I found solace in history bounding. For example, I love to wear skinny jeans, but I pair them with my Victorian reproduction shoes. I've also gotten into using more natural fabrics such as linen, cotton, and wool. I honestly couldn't have asked for better results. I am super pleased with how everything turned out.
Okay, so it's definitely been a long 3 years trying out this whole cottagecore thing, and overall I expected it to be quite an entertaining fantasy, and indeed it was. But I also came away with some really incredible benefits. So I was able to narrow down to about 5 primary takeaways from this entire experiment. Number 1, I learned that my career is not my identity.
Even though I'm no farmer and still very green in learning how to garden, attempting this lifestyle has helped me get away from the city grind, and it's changed my outlook in terms of how I want to live my life. Just to clarify, I'm extremely proud of the work that I put into getting my graduate degree, and I feel very fulfilled working in my current profession. I also don't plan on stopping. When the time is right, I still haven't forgotten my dream of possibly getting a PhD. However, my career is not the first thing I'm eager to tell people in that very American greeting question. What do you do? It's just no longer how I identify myself, nor how I like to identify myself. I do this work, but I'm not the work that I do. At the end of the day, although my profession is scholarly and not related to business, it still adheres to a capitalistic system, and it still forces me to participate in that system. And that system is not my dream. I don't want to live to overconsume. Our hyper-capitalistic society forces consumption. It promises happiness because you are considered less. As Karl Marx put it in his commentary on capitalism, human requirements, and division of labor, the less you are, the less you express your own life. The more you have, the greater is your alienated life. The greater is the store of your estranged being. In simplistic terms, you're never satisfied. Although I can't quantify cottagecore and its impact on my life and environment, it has allowed me to instead cultivate my social needs, environmental needs, and creative needs. Overall, it has made me a lot happier.
Number 2, I learned to appreciate the smaller things in life.
Since I got a little philosophical, let me get into a lighter outlook. Through cottagecore, I actually did begin to appreciate smaller things in life, such as getting a phone call from friends and family, discovering a hummingbird in my garden, or just taking a walk without listening to any music and actually being aware of the rustling trees and the sounds of the birds. It does sound a little bit cliche, but the longer I immersed myself in trying to live life inspired by cottagecore, the less patience I had for many aspects of modern life, such as social media scrolling, shopping, career grinding, and even television and video games. And I love video games. Now, don't mistake me. I am not one of those people who thinks that the past was better. I like living in the present. Human rights are a little bit better, and medicine is more reliable. What I do wish we had from the past, though, is a healthier environment, less pollution, and less social media. Which leads me to my next point.
Number 3, I found a lot less fulfillment in technology use. So that includes watching television, being on my phone, computers, video games, and I enjoy video games quite a bit. But I found something more fulfilling in working with my hands.
I still love my laptop and YouTube, but I do doom scroll a lot less. I also spend less time looking for things to entertain myself with. That song from Encanto, What Else Can I Do, is stuck in my head. What can I do with these 2 hands? What can I create? What can I manifest? This all became way more important than what kind of item or game I can play on my phone or what I can watch.
Number 4, I began to cultivate healthier relationships, and that goes for friends, family, and coworkers.
I have more friends and talk to my family a lot more. I've also limited contact with people that add to my stress and learned to set boundaries at work and in my personal life. One of my favorite things to do is go bike riding with my husband on weekends. No music, no drama, just a fun ride on a dirt trail for 15 miles. I engage with my artistic pursuits, love meeting new people, and do my best not to take on more responsibilities than I can reasonably handle.
Number 5. This is probably the most important one. I became more self-sufficient and more confident about being self-sufficient.
This is probably the piece that I'm the most proud of. Last year, I wouldn't have expected to be able to build my own fireplace facing, shelves, lay on brick, make pillows, sew blankets and curtains, and garden and grow my own herbs and cook with those herbs. Being able to do all of this required a massive learning curve, and it wasn't always easy. There were times I got frustrated, wanted to quit, times when I thought, why am I doing this? But at the end of the day, skill building has given me a sense of autonomy and confidence that I didn't have before, and I'm very grateful for that. Treating cottagecore as a subculture is more than just frolicking around in frilly dresses, holding woodland animals, and taking aesthetically beautiful pictures. When implemented as a lifestyle, it requires a lot of work and grit. Mentally, the work itself seems simple, but there's a method to the cottagecore madness, and it requires a specific skill set that mirrors those seen in farmers, seamstresses, and other individuals with high-value skills. It reminds me why homesteading, although a beautiful dream of mine, would not be compatible for my current way of life. But I do value the new set of skills I obtained, and I plan on continuing some semblance of the cottagecore lifestyle, albeit with a more relaxed approach.
So thank you so much for making it to the end of the video. I very much appreciate that you took some time out of your life to watch me ramble on about this possibly insignificant thing. I hope to hear from you in the comments, however. What do you think about cottagecore? Do you think it's overrated? Do you think it's a big lie? I would love to know what you think in the comments below. What is your opinion about this very painful video? Whether it's positive or negative, I would very much appreciate your feedback. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you guys later.